plagiarism, confusing feedback, and the nasty sense of humor. This is Writing Advice Blitz. First question of the day is, who are you? Or rather, who am I? Hello there, my name is Max, also known as M. Kieran. I am an independent novelist, and I have also been running a writing advice blog for about 2 years now. I've been making tons of story seeds and prompts and writing exercises, and of course giving tons and tons and tons of writing advice. It's come to the point now where I cannot physically answer all of the questions I get. So I decided to make this video series in order to tackle as many questions as possible. Now, before we begin though, let me just give you the common disclaimer and remind you all that the following is simply just my opinion, my advice, and what worked for me. Do not take the following as gospel. It is just what worked for me. Now, let's start. How do you choose between first or third person narration? That depends on what I want to do with the story. Before anything, I believe that first and third person narration are both perfectly good for what they do. I just think that you can do a little bit more with one than the other. I use first person better when it comes to character pieces, especially when you want to get into someone's head. If the story revolves around one person's struggle, life, goals, dreams, I have a lot more fun when I get into their head and I write in first person. Now, the flip side of that is that I prefer to use third person when I want to ration the information the reader needs to know. I find that writing in third person makes it a lot easier to surprise the reader and give them twists. Additionally, of course, it should go without saying that third person, I personally think it's more effective for thrillers and mystery novels and stories because it keeps you out of the character's head, so you can't know entirely what's going on with them and around them, and the remaining cast, of course. So it's good to keep the reader in the dark, so that's what I think. Ultimately, of course, you should go for whatever is the most fun to you. That is my personal rule. Next question. Do you consider fanfiction to be plagiarism? Let's take a step back and actually review the definition of plagiarism. Plagiarism is the act of taking someone else's work and claiming it as your own original creation. This is such as taking an essay you found on Google and giving it to your teacher and saying that that is your homework, or taking a photo you found on Flickr and claiming it as your own. That being said, I think that one of the elements of fanfiction is kind of a sense of self-awareness. And really, I don't think anyone on AO3 is claiming they came up with Harry Potter. So, definition-wise, no, I don't think fanfiction is plagiarism. Of course, there's also conversation that sparks from this, because when I get questions like this, I usually get the feeling that it's not really about the plagiarism part, it's about a grander sense, boiling down to, do you think fanfiction is a bad thing? And I don't think fanfiction is a bad thing. I think ultimately it's pretty harmless, and as long as you're not selling what you make, you are fine in my books. Also, if you want to write fanfiction of my dumb characters, I would totally not maybe read it. Next question. My chapters always end up being too short. What do you recommend? Well, this is one of the situations in which I have to ask you what is your point of reference for a chapter that is too long and too short. Personally, I don't care about these things. If a chapter comes out to be 1 page or comes out to be 30 pages, it's fine by me because ultimately I'm writing to get the scene out of the way. Ultimately, the point of a chapter is to move the story forward, and if the story moves forward in a page or in 30 pages, it's fine by me. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Questions like this, to me, just kind of ring with this element of peer pressure, like you realize that your chapters are not as long as other people's chapters. And I get that. I dealt with that myself. When I first got started, I felt conflicted because I realized that my books were not as long as the books I'd been reading my entire life. The longest book I've ever written was about 220 pages. And the books I write now are between 180 and 150. Of course, it took me a while to realize that it was okay to be different. I know it's really hard when you are first getting started, but let me just tell you right now, and I say this on the blog all the time, but I'm going to say it again so you all get it. As long as you tell an enticing and compelling story, it does not matter how you get us there. Seriously. That's it. That's the magic trick. Now, as most of you know, I am infamous because I despise filler. Nothing makes me more angry than reading a story that is purposefully being padded out for length. That just makes me angry. So no, don't expect me to tell you that you should pad out your story. Though I'm going to give you one tip that I find is very helpful for amateur writers or people who are starting out. I don't really like to use the term amateur, but you know. Anyways, my tip is this. Make sure that when you are writing a chapter that you always describe what the location looks like and what the new characters, if you're introducing a new character, looks like. One of the big notes that I find myself giving to new writers when I give them feedback is that they seem to forget to describe the places we're going and the things we're coming in contact with. It feels to me that sometimes new writers just kind of want to push along, get as much done as possible, get the story, get in, get out, you know? And with time, you'll learn to just enjoy the process and just, walk us through it, you know? The best way that I phrase this is that I want to see the world just like you see it. And that's all I have to say about that. Next question. I keep getting contradictory feedback on my writing. What do you recommend? I recommend you read On Writing by Stephen King because it's like the best book on writing ever. Yay, first video and I already mentioned him. You should really read the book though. Regardless, why is that book good? Well, it's a great book, man. Regardless, in the book On Writing by Stephen King, he talks about feedback. I mean, he talks about everything regarding writing, but on his segment on feedback, he talks about his personal rule regarding getting contradictory feedback. That is, for example, when one of your betas loves what you did with this particular scene, and the other beta doesn't like what you did with that particular scene. Of course, they both provide meaningful feedback because just not liking something is not actually giving you feedback. In the book, Stephen King says that when he finds himself between two pieces of contradictory feedback, it falls on him to decide which one to go for. And personally, I love using this, and when I find myself in that situation, I like to step out of my own mind for a moment. Step back, look at the feedback in question and look at it objectively and consider both sides. Ultimately, let us remember that our job as storytellers is to create the best story possible. And I can tell you myself, from the point of view of someone who has written 8+ books, that you sometimes end up cutting out things that you liked, or you end up doing changes that you would have disagreed with when you first got started, but then ultimately you feel they're right because our job is to tell the best story possible. And take it from the person who has rewritten multiple first chapters and chopped out entire openings of books, that change is good because the final product is what matters the most, What do I recommend? Look at both pieces of feedback. And if they are entirely contradictory, decide for yourself. You're the writer, you're the boss. Next question. How do you go about writing a character who's fundamentally different than you? I believe the example that was given for this was a writer writing a character who happens to think war is a good thing. And of course the writer feels the other way. Personally, what I like to do, and let me just take a moment first to be rather honest and admit that that's actually one of my most favorite parts of writing. Because for me, it's all about character. I love characters. Settings are fun, but ultimately it's the characters in those settings that excite me and make me want to write. And it is at times when I stumble on characters who are entirely different than me as a person that I just become entirely excited to write about them, especially in first person, because it allows me to get into their head. You see what I did? I'm referencing the other question I answered earlier. But how do I go about doing that? I know that this is harder for other people, because I've just gotten so used to this, writing a lot and stuff, but I just try my darnest to just displace myself, my persona, my biases, and just get into the character's head. You guys have seen me mention this a lot of times on the blog, but I'm gonna say it again. Get out of the way of your story. And I mean it. I mean, I know that it's hard writing about a character who is fundamentally different than you, who has contradictory beliefs, and I will expand on this on the next question, but really, like, there's no magic trick to this. You simply just have to turn off your biases, turn off your feelings, your values, and get into the mind of this person. Additionally, I would recommend that you write about them in first person, since that will allow you to see their point of view. Now, without getting too much into the concept of morality, which is one of my favorite subjects, that is why I don't want to go into it, because I know that I will rant for hours. I do want to make it very clear, though, that a lot of people don't like the idea of writing about someone who's different than them in first person because, and I don't mean to be rude, it kind of humanizes people who are their enemies. And maybe I'm just weird, but I love being able to see how a person stands where they are, the road that led them there. Except for that jackass, I want him dead. That's not true, I don't want him dead, I want him to stop speeding past my street. It is my street, I own it, this is my town! But yeah, maybe I'm weird, but I love being able to see how someone got there, because as people on the blog know, and you have seen me screaming in the tags, but I don't believe in evil. There's no such thing as good or evil. They're simply just things people do. Simple as that. Evil to me is incredibly boring because I can't relate to evil. But I can relate to things like selfishness and bitterness and just cruelty. Those things I can understand because they're things that we can all end up being. You know, if we make mistakes or if we make changes, we can end up being like those people. Evil to me is just boring. So, just quick review. If you want to write about somebody who's fundamentally different than you, turn off your biases. Go all out, get in their head, and see how they got there. Because if you understand them, it is likely that the reader will understand them as well. I hope that helps. Next question. One of my characters has a very sick sense of humor. What do you recommend? Well, I know that I've talked about this in the past, but and I know this is hard to grasp because your English teacher or your creative writing teacher in high school would have never told you this, but I'm going to tell you this because someone has to. Sometimes you end up writing about rotten people. I mean it, it's true. Sometimes you just end up writing about the worst people in the world. And that's okay. It really is. Sometimes you just end up writing about rotten people, people who are awful and bitter and selfish and cruel, and that's okay, because we can all become those things. And really, I myself don't really enjoy a dark and sick sense of humor, but I can understand why someone would. And that's okay. As with the previous question, my recommendation is the same. Get inside the character's head. And unless they're a supporting character, at least reach to understand them. And write them out. Don't hold back. Don't censor yourself. You know, just because this character has a sick sense of humor doesn't mean you have a sick sense of humor. You know, really, ultimately, the most powerful ability that we have as writers is our ability to empathize with others. Because ultimately, that's what enables us to tell so many stories. Finally, I'm gonna just come and say this right now because I know someone out there is yelling at me to not talk about this, but let me just say it very quickly. I completely and outright disagree with changing characters. No. The characters are always right. If this character has a sick sense of humor, then it is your challenge to write that sick sense of humor. Simple as that. That is my stand on this. I believe that we don't come up with stories. We find those stories. We stumble upon them. And it is our job and our duty to unbury them, to dig them out from wherever we find them, and to share them with the world. And you just happen to have found a very sick person with a nasty sense of humor. And, I mean, I don't know, to me it sounds like fun. Go for it, go all out, go crazy. See where it takes you. To be entirely honest, I feel that writing this ridiculous character who is inherently different than your own values will be a lot more fun than just taking that humor away. And as I've always been saying, you know, when posed with two different options, you should go for the one that is the most fun. and the most challenging to write, because that is the way you're going to grow. I hope that helps. That's about 6 questions in like 20 minutes. Not bad, right? Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm playing around with some more new video formats, and I am not kidding, I do get a lot of questions, but I don't want to tell people to stop sending me questions because, ultimately I'm here to help you guys. So I felt that this video format would be the best way to tackle all of those questions that I just don't have the time to write a full-on essay about. So let me know what you think. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. I'm making this like a weekly video series, but if I get enough questions and and the feedback for this is awesome, I may just make it like twice a week sort of series. So that just depends on your feedback. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your friends, give it a like, subscribe if you want more, and if you want more writing advice, head over to my blog, maxkieran.tumblr.com. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. What is this? What is this? What is... What, like, am I a pilot now? What? I was like this close to doing the Dodger kiss thing, but... Cut!